You know, America is not a linear story. Lonnie Bunch, Secretary of the Smithsonian, says that America is more than an idea. It's not just even an argument. America's a fight. It's a fight.
Good evening, everybody, and my name is David Leonard. I will be your host and moderator for tonight. Welcome to your library. Welcome to the Abbey Room here at the Central Library in Copley Square. Thank you for joining us in person. We're also joined by an online audience this evening who will also be participating. We are competing with, I think, an air conditioner in the back of the room because it's starting to get a little warm. But we are mic'd, and we'll do our best to make this an engaging and great conversation. Tonight is actually the last in this series of the Lowell Lectures, and is produced in collaboration with the GBH Forum Network. Our bookstore partner is Trident Bookstores and Cafe. We'll be posting some information about them for our online attendees, as well as having a short book signing for us at the end of tonight's conversation. Our theme for this series, building on our public conversation and repairing America series, is equity, hope, healing, and resilience. So I think that our conversation tonight will pick up some of those themes. The program will run about 60 to 70 minutes. We'll begin with conversation between our guest and myself. We'll then have some questions that we got at registration. We'll take some from the audience here in person, as well as some from online if there are. And so our guest this evening is now one of the nation's most prominent scholars. Dr. Eddie Glaude is an author, political commentator, public intellectual, passionate educator, who examines the complex dynamics of the American experience. His writings, including Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul, In a Shade of Blue, Pragmatism and the Politics of Black America, and his most recent, the New York Times bestseller, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own, takes a wide look at black communities, the difficulties of race in the United States, and the challenges we face as a democracy. In his writing and speaking, Glaude is an American critic in the tradition of James Baldwin and Ralph Waldo Emerson, confronting history and bringing our nation's complexities, vulnerabilities, and hope into full view. In one of his favorite quotes from W.E.B. Du Bois, hope that is not hopeless, but a bit unhopeful. We'll talk to him about that in a moment. Please join me in welcoming our guest this evening. So, although tonight's conversation, we're going to talk about our nation's history, and it's billed as shedding new light on complexities of race and democracy. We like to get to know our guests a little bit personally and their own story first. So, how did you get to become an expert on race and democracy in America? Is that something one wakes up one day and decides to do?
No, but it's such a delight to be here with you, David, and to thank you all for taking the time to come out and be in conversation with us. I'm a country boy from the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. Mm-hmm. My mother worked in the janitorial service for Ingalls Shipyard. Okay. She dropped out of school in the 9th grade. To have her first baby. My dad was the second African American hired in the post office, in Pascagoula. But he left home very early to join the Navy and to fight in Vietnam. So I didn't grow up in a house with books. People didn't read. Folk were trying to keep a roof over our heads and put food on the table. Yeah. But there was this insistence, it was a demand actually, by my father that we reach for a bigger world, a more expansive understanding of ourselves, because our little town was too small for us. He kept saying that over and over again. And to be honest with you, it's when I found my way to Morehouse College in Atlanta that everything kind of opened up. Yeah. And it's there where the seeds were planted for me to become a scholar.
Now, there's a little library story in your early childhood as well that feeds this question.
Sure. My mom, you know, we had summer jobs back then. I was notoriously lazy. My mother said I was born to push a pencil. That manual labor and I didn't mix. We were oil and water. So I asked her one summer to work at Ingalls at the shipyard. She says, "You're not going to embarrass me down there." So I went and got a job at the local library, Pascagoula Regional Library.
And what age were you at this
I was
point?
about 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And I was a page. So my task was to shelve books. And there was a book. Because, let me say, there's a backstory. Because I think one of the unique features of Mississippi, I think it's at the heart of our literature. It's at the heart of Faulkner. It's at the heart of Eudora Welty. Are the silences. Jasmine Ward. It's what's not said. That's between the lines. It's that makes Mississippi literature so powerful. And so I grew up in a house full of silence. Loud silence. Folk didn't speak. They didn't talk about what happened or what was happening. And so I didn't know much about the history of my little town. I didn't know much about the particulars of the history of our state. My dad had created this bubble. I'm writing about this now, trying to think through what this sense of isolation and silence meant. So I'm shelving books, and I come across the first edition, published by University of Mississippi Press, of the Second Race Reform and Rebellion, the Second Reconstruction, authored by Manning Marable. And it's the history of the 20th century. And I sit down in the middle of, between the shelves of books, and I start reading. And I don't stop. You can hear people trying to figure out where I am. Folk find out I've been sitting in between the shelves. And it's in that book that I first encountered it beyond the name, Medgar Evers. It's in that book that I really saw how vicious, how violent Mississippi was. So I checked it out, and I never returned it.
To this day?
The book has traveled with me at every stage of my career. And the irony, of course, is that when I became a professor, I taught it. I ordered it. And it was in that library where that encounter happened, right? Paula Hedgewood, who was my colleague, I still remember Paula's name. We were both pages together. She used to let me borrow things, but anyway.
And the other irony is we're sitting in the room that was the original delivery room for the Boston Public Library. So, originally patrons would not be able to go browse the shelves themselves. They would fill out a slip, pass it to the library staff person, and they would wait in this room and perhaps contemplate the murals around the ceiling. So, so welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the good news is, if it was from Boston, we've eliminated late fines, so you'd be okay.
I need to give them a copy of that book. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So let's maybe come forward to today, sure. 2022. The state of race and democracy is what we said we would talk about. How are we doing from where you sit?
Oh, well, the Republic stands on a knife's edge. Again.
Because?
The central contradiction that has always threatened to undermine American democracy has reared its head. We are in the midst right now of relitigating the mid-20th century.
Okay.
The social revolution that ushered in this new world, right? that transformed the landscape. The women's movement, the gay liberation movement, the black freedom struggle, right? That shifted the workplace, that changed the domestic sphere. What are we seeing right now? Don't say gay laws in Florida. We're about to witness the overturning of Roe v. Wade. An all-out assault on voting rights. And remember, America hasn't been truly a multiracial democracy for long. We've only been really a democracy since 1965.
Right, right. I mean, even suffrage, women's suffrage, 1919, white women suffrage, right?
So, and then that's being generous, because we know as soon as the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, there were forces aimed to undermine it. Remember, in 1981, just 16 years after the passage of VRA, Ronald Reagan decides that he's going to support its reauthorization. But he says, I'm going to support it, but it needs to be amended. What is the nature of the amendment he proposes? That we rid the VRA of Section 5.
Okay, and Section 5?
Section 5 is the section around preclearance that Shelby v. Holder gutted in 2013, which unleashed the all-out assault on voting rights that we're experiencing today. Okay. And so I say all of that to say what? Since the social revolutions of the mid-20th century, there has been an ongoing, deliberate, concerted effort to undo it. And we're living right now, in this moment, we're living the consequences of those efforts. So, yeah.
The phenomena you just described are broader than, my hypothesis would be, they're broader than racial divide issues per se. But maybe unpack that for me. Because sometimes.
They can be, right? Now, remember, Roe v. Wade has everything to do with not only controlling women's bodies, but it also has everything to do with reproduction. Right. How do we reproduce the nation in the face of the feeling that we could easily be wiped out in some ways, right? The gay liberation movement, at its heart, this is an abomination. Why? Because this is about reproduction, right? And we've been talking about, even in Alito's draft opinion, there is reference to declining birth rates. There is this sense that all of this is kind of connected to something about, or to this idea that we must remain a white nation in the vein of old Europe. And there are these various elements that participate in its, oh, wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
That there are these various elements that are part of its production or sustaining this notion. But race is the central contradiction. No, and I say race is the central contradiction, David, not in terms of black folk. See, this is the key. The central contradiction rests in a certain conception of white folk. And then what follows from that.
So when we think about the pushback against gay rights or women's rights, but we unpack those in terms of racial demographics, we find that there's a disproportionality about both of those. That in reality, in terms of the gay liberation movement, it certainly advanced the cause fastest for gay white men. Not always for people of color who would also identify as LGBTQ. And similarly, in the women's rights and reproductive rights issues, it is those who have least access to resources that are disproportionately affected, which happens to coincide often with communities of color.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's that narrative that draws this back to race, even if it doesn't look like it on the first.
And it's not to be reductive in any crude sense. It's to kind of understand the complex relationship, this constellation of issues that is rendered through this shorthand of the culture wars. Right. And when we unpack the culture wars as a way of branding a sensibility that in effect says or projects this idea that America must be white cisgendered male, and it's at its core, right? And everything else must be subordinate to that vision. So, we need to stop calling it Culture Wars 2.0. We need to call it what it is, and that is a refusal to accept the diversity of America as it is, right?
And I think so it's not about blackness per se, and we have to confront what this concept of whiteness is as you talk about it. So I think there's that, and I'd like your thoughts on that. But I'd also like to talk about that the different communities of color experience this in different ways and similar ways. So I'd like you to talk about that hypothesis as well. In some ways, the rise in anti-Asian and anti-Asian American hate through the life of the pandemic was a new awakening of that particular aspect of this work as well.
Or reiteration.
Right.
So we've had, particularly in the context of World War II, we've had, the Yellow Scare. We've seen the mobilization of the. So all you have to do is watch reruns of the Three Stooges or the Little Rascals, and you see representation. I just dated myself, didn't I? You see representations of the Far East as exotic as this place of danger and the like. So. And again, that is not so much about Asian populations being the object of a certain kind of discriminatory practice. It's also how is whiteness being articulated vis-a-vis these folk, right? And the ways in which these terrors around demographic shifts have evidenced themselves. So when Donald Trump says the Chinese virus, what is he mobilizing in that moment? How does it bear family resemblance to the contagion at the south of the border? What is he saying in those moments? What is he mobilizing in those moments in terms of a certain set of sensibilities around those bodies that threaten our way of life? It's just as, at the turn of the century, in the 19th century, there was a tuberculosis outbreak. And in places like Atlanta, the way in which TB was accounted for was by way of black washerwomen. These women who were washing the clothes of white people in the affluent areas of Atlanta, they were the source of TB because they lived in squalor. And we were sending our things to them. And so you can see, as my colleague Tara Hunter has written about, you can see in public newspapers the way in which these particular people are being rendered as the site of disease, right? As a way of kind of, in some ways, displacing the disparity, the inequality that was built into a way of life. So, but it's also very interesting too, because even though Asian American communities are objects, have been and continue to be objects of extraordinary violence, there's also ways in which those communities can participate, right, in the hierarchy of race in the United States by engaging in ongoing distancing practices from those who are at the bottom. So we see the suit with regards to admissions at Harvard. Right? Who's taking our place? Who's getting in the way? Who's stepping in front of the line? Who's putting their thumb on the scale? So there's a way in which certain communities can participate in whiteness, even though they're not. Think about who's the leader of the Proud Boys. It's a Latino man. Think about George Zimmerman. It's a Latino man. Right? So whiteness functions ideologically, right? Not necessarily in relation to particular bodies, but as an ideology that reflects a hierarchy, so that we just want to be distant from that bottom, so that we don't have to bear the brunt of its marks.
So if I follow one thread of that to its logical conclusion, then we're recasting this as a difference in power and control and political authority.
In part, yes.
Yeah.
In part, absolutely. But it also has cultural resonances, right?
Right. But that doesn't seem to fully explain, even though race itself is a constructed phenomenon, a socially constructed phenomenon, that alone doesn't seem to suggest this desire of human beings to find something that is alien or other in other human beings and use that as a way to not engage.
Right, I mean, So, I mean, it's certainly the case that human beings over the course of our time of walking this planet have engaged in this kind of differentiation often, right, as a way of defining inside and outside. Right. It's just the particular way that we have done it.
Right. Right. Yeah, like so what is the particular American version of this that persists for what, 400 years? A little more, a little less, depending on where you want to draw the lines?
And you know, it's our inheritance, it's
right, not
just ours. Right. When Begin Again was published in the UK, I was like, this is yours too. Right. Right. And Baldwin, when he went to France, he said, I didn't trade one myth to embrace one fantasy to come and embrace another. Yeah. You know. So there is this slavery. Yep. Sits at the heart of the American project. Mm-hmm. The heartbeat of America, as my colleague Imani Perry puts it, is not. The heart of America isn't the Midwest. Mm-hmm. The heart of America, the heartbeat of this country is the South. Mm-hmm. Right? How it has funded and fueled the American project. Mm-hmm. How it has paid off our debt. Mm-hmm. And the South grinds people. Mm-hmm. Right? It is a particular place. And as Malcolm X says, as long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're in the South. You see my, right. No, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's the same continent, right? So, yeah. Yeah. And so which is also why I think why it's interesting that for 13-year-old Eddie, that's his first understanding or first grappling with these issues, at least from a book.
You know, the only thing I knew is that I remember watching my dad watch the Eyes on the Prize series when it first came out.
Sure.
And my dad didn't suffer white people, still doesn't. Mm. When we moved into our neighborhood, remember he's the second African-American hired at the post office. That's right. High cotton.
Okay.
That's a middle-class life in Mississippi in some ways. People shot out our back window because the Fantuzos sold the house to these black folk, which he shouldn't have. So they shot out the house, the window in the back. Yeah. My dad responded with a 12-gauge shotgun and blew the limb off of their magnolia tree. And said, shoot back here again. Okay. He caught the neighbors digging up flowers out of the flower bed. Mm. And the neighbor said, I gave these to Fantuzo. I didn't give them to you. And my dad said, I bought this. It's mine. These are mine. Dig again. Mm-hmm. Whereas I write in Democracy in Black, I'm playing with my Tonka truck. You remember those old Tonka trucks? Playing with my neighbor, and we're making our Tonka truck noises. And then all of a sudden I hear, stop playing with that N-word. Mm. Mm. And it's the first time I had heard that word in that context. Mm. And I looked at my new friend, to see what he was going to do, and he grabbed his truck and he went to his dad. And I went to my dad and I told him what happened. Yeah. And this Vietnam veteran, I didn't find this out till later, confronted that man with a .38.
Okay.
Hit him in the chest with the butt of it. Said, if you ever talk to my son like that. Mm. Right? Mm. So the way in which I encountered race viscerally was rage. Mm. And that rage was embodied in a man that scared the hell out of me. Mm. Yeah. So when I encountered it in a book, these dates when I found out, I didn't find out that Stokely Carmichael and Bob Moses and Ivanhoe Donaldson and these folk organized in my town until I read Charles Payne's book about, you know, movement organizers in Mississippi. And I'm looking at his footnotes and I see Moss Point, you know, and I go, what? Then I talk to my uncle, who I rarely talk to, says, oh yeah, we desegregated the pools. And they helped us.
Right.
SNCC was down here all the time.
But didn't want to talk to you about it, or
My
didn't?
dad had this, I think he decided that there was something that he had to do for us. And that involved a bubble of sorts, but he put us in this liminal space because as the second man hired at the post office, we lived a middle-class life, but they didn't go to Jackson State. They weren't a part of the Boulay or some fraternities. So we weren't, by way of status, black middle class.
Okay.
He was the thug from high school who made good.
Interesting.
So there was no social life in that regard. And then we were living among white, and there was no, so we were betwixt and between. So it's a sense, in my life, there are the silences and there's sense of isolation combined. So that's been at the heart of my work. So I guess it makes me truly Mississippian.
Either out of a sense of protection, or just out of not belonging to either world?
Or both.
Or both.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued also by your fascination with James Baldwin. I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about the story of how that came to be.
Oh, man. Jimmy. So I came to Baldwin late. I cut my political teeth at Morehouse in the black nationalist tradition, although I was reading Dostoevsky and Turgenev and Tolstoy and all this other stuff. I wasn't mature enough to read him because reading him forced me to deal with the interior that I wasn't quite ready to deal with. That I wasn't, I barely survived writing Begin Again because, I tell this story all the time. I remember the sentences weren't jumping, the book wasn't coming together, and I have a saint's candle of Baldwin right next to my computer, and I remember hearing him say, if we're gonna do this together, old boy, you're going to have to deal with you. And that meant I had to deal with the fact that I'm this vulnerable little boy with daddy issues. Now, I couldn't get there until later. When I was in graduate school, I wrote all my papers. My first year of graduate school at Princeton, all my essays were on Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, or Ralph Ellison's Shadow and Act, or Going to the Territory, putting Ellison in conversation with Richard Rorty, thinking about Kenneth Burke, and and the way in which Ellison and Burke's correspondence. That's what I like, because I loved Burke. I loved Ellison's pose. I loved his mask. I could deal with the argument on the page. Baldwin got into the marrow of my bones. And as I write in the book, whenever I read Baldwin with my white colleagues, I had to deal with flushed faces. I had to deal with their discomfort. And I didn't want to manage that either.
Right. It's what Robin DiAngelo now calls white fragility in some ways in these situations. Right?
And Robin is a sweetheart. I disagree so much with what she does, but I think that is exactly, I didn't want to deal with that in the classroom, right? But
nor should you have to, perhaps.
Yeah, but Baldwin is everywhere in my work. From my first book, In a Shade of Blue, which is a book presumably about pragmatism and my reading of John Dewey, Baldwin is in the epigraph of every chapter except for the last one, which is Morrison, which has Morrison. In Democracy in Black, Baldwin is everywhere. So I decided to usher him onto the stage, not get him out of the background. And what Baldwin taught me is that I could be enraged and I can love. He gave me a language to manage my anger, to account for it, to sit in it, to understand it as qualitatively human, a substantive human response, but also to understand that to sit in it, to dwell in it, to rest there, is to condemn oneself to the gallows. And so the only way to get out is to love your way, right? And then the last point is that, he said, he doesn't remember, he says he was born afraid. He's born scared. And he says you have to run towards your fear. If you're ever, not to conquer it, but if you're ever to be who you think you're called to be, you have to run to your fear. And so it became this amazing kind of walking partner. He's my muse. Then he's this gay dude.
Right.
In the 1940s and 50s, Baldwin is out. The second book after Go Tell It on the Mountain, the second novel, is Giovanni's Room. He's like, you can't hold this against me. I told you. The American publishers refused to publish it. He has to get it published in London. I interviewed Angela Davis for Begin Again, and she said in so many ways, he was out there all by himself. So this small, fragile, queer black man speaking his mind, daring to imagine himself as an artist, and literally willing himself into becoming one of the most amazing voices of the 20th century.
I love the reference that I think it's in the book where Malcolm X is coming forward and saying he always wants to show up to when James Baldwin was speaking.
Because he's going to learn something, right?
No question about the significance. We're going to have to move a little
I'll
forward.
be quicker, I promise. You see, I get paid to run my mouth.
Let's come back to today, or move closer today, if we will. I think Obama as president was a significant move around America confronting race, but there was this phrase used for a while, which then clearly everybody had to move away from, of could this be the start of a post-racial America? I'm paraphrasing. Tell us about
that was one of the latest illusion, one of our much needed fantasies.
Right.
Bill Bennett, the former Secretary of Education for Ronald Reagan, declared on CNN, no more excuses on the night of the election. No more excuses. As if Obama's election represented an immediate kind of resolving of the contradictions at the heart of the country. My son grew up with a black man in the White House, a black family, right, in the White House. He also grew up with Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, Ayanna Mathis. He also grew up in an intense, in a society that has been defined by racist hatred, grievance. Obama was, how can I put this? The American ideology works like a ritual of absolution. A ritual of absolution. The fact that we're always already on the road to a more perfect union, the ideology works efficiently in absolving us of our sins repeatedly. I mean, it's brilliant in how it functions. And it also gives us occasions repeatedly to have moral holidays. And here I'm echoing William James, right? We have these moral holidays because we know that we're by definition the shining city on the hill. We know by definition we're the Redeemer nation. And so when Obama showed up,
we can check that box and keep going, right?
Oh, yes. Then we once had...
Next chapter of Manifest Destiny, please.
We had slaves. Now look, we have a president. Nowhere in the country, Obama, nowhere in the world could this happen. That's a lie. Because it already had. right? Oh, we used to have children who worked 8, 12 hours a day. Now we don't. See, we're in a more perfect union. Oh, women couldn't vote. Now they do. See, it is a ritual of absolution to keep us from actually confronting our sins, you see. This is the debate that John Meacham and I have all the time, right? So part of what Obama was for a moment was it offered absolution.
Without necessarily doing the actual work, right?
No, it's like sprinkling water. I grew up Catholic. It's still sinful. Yeah. Still wildly, in sin, so. And I took a big hit on that because I understood. I called Obama a Melvillian confidence man, selling the snake oil of hope and change. Oh, I got in a lot of trouble for that formulation.
When did the when of that is, okay, so 2016.
I thought once he saw what the Republicans were doing, that they were stonewalling him at every turn, I was like, go big. Right. And when he didn't, I realized who he was.
Well, I think when hope is raised too high, what follows is going to be disappointment. And I think that is actually what transpired there. But I didn't know that at the time. You clearly did. So that's what's interesting on that point. The appetite for change post the murder of George Floyd is an interesting question. And yes, you mentioned several other names that we can substitute in that we all know and wish we didn't, but we do. And so I think the question is, and it's going to be the same question about the gun control issue as well. Is this time different? Is this time sustainable? Is the appetite for change going to take hold?
There's this wonderful line that Baldwin uses. He says, America changes all the time without ever changing at all. Right, so that question, is this the one? Is this the one? It's like Wolf Blitzer on CNN. I can invoke CNN even though I'm under contract for MSNBC. Is this who we are? Is this who we, every time you say it's the same damn question.
Apparently, yes, it is. Right?
Can we draw the conclusion? George Floyd represented, we all, because we were locked up in our homes, experiencing the horror of COVID. Yeah. We all saw a lynching for 9 minutes.
Right. On video.
On loop.
Right.
We all saw it.
Right.
And what was remarkable is the outpouring, not only in the United States, but across the globe, in the midst of a pandemic that was slaughtering us. And it was a cross-color, it was a cross-generation of folk demanding fundamental change. And immediately, we saw what we might call the backlash or the betrayal. Right. America is not a linear story. Right. Lonnie Bunch, Secretary of the Smithsonian, says that America is more than an idea. It's not just even an argument. America's a fight. It's a fight. And so we saw it immediately. And when we think about the promise of George Floyd and the protests that followed, and the debates that followed, what has happened since? The debates around defund the police, the debates around critical race theory. We can just go down the line. We've been kind of overrun by these forces in some ways.
The quote that we opened with that you used, this definition of hope that is
not hopeless, but unhopeful. Yeah.
Could you unpack that for us a bit
It's
more?
a blue sensibility.
Okay.
You can't come out of the tradition out of which I come and run around thinking that, like Pangloss, that this is the best of all possible worlds.
Right. Right.
That makes no damn sense.
Right. It'd be denial.
Right. And so B.B. King would say, nobody loves me but my mother, but she could be jiving too. So it's a blue sensibility that has everything to do with the reality of the darkness within which one has to imagine possibility. Okay. What does it mean for me as a parent to place a crown above my child's head, knowing that that child could be sold, knowing that child could be killed by the police, knowing that that child will be despised? What does it mean for me to dare to do so? Baldwin would render it this way: hope is invented every day. And if you have to invent hope every day, that means you have to beat back despair every day. So I'm not I reject, like Reinhold Niebuhr, I reject, the notion of optimism, right? Optimism and pessimism are flip sides of the same coin. I'm much more of a meliorist. I believe in hope.
Okay. But you distinguish firmly between optimism and hopefulness.
Yeah, hopefulness, there's no guarantee.
Okay.
Hopefulness is, hopefulness is in things of, it's almost like faith, right? There's no guarantee of the outcome. The only thing that hope can, for me, hope is fundamental to my belief and faith in your and my capacity to be otherwise. And part of what I do, David, is I want to say to my white fellow brothers and sisters that you are more than the ideology of whiteness. You're more than that.
Right.
And to give it up, right, doesn't mean that somehow you turn your back on you. You're more than that. And
because if race is a construct, then that's a limiting factor, and that applies to everybody.
But the fact money is a construct.
Sure.
But it's still real.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't believe it, give me yours. So the fact that it's a construction means that it has a beginning, it has a history.
It's a product of human choices.
It's a product like our world is.
Right. Right.
And so I think we can imagine ourselves differently if we can only reach for different vocabulary. It's a different language. I guess this is why Plato has to banish the poets from the Republic, because the poets help us see ourselves differently in much more expansive terms. Lord, do we need poets today? My God, we need poets.
I can take a couple of questions that
were
submitted
absolutely.
at registration
Absolutely.
and then from the audience. I'm going to paraphrase one because it's about what is the role of reparations in this dialogue? Is this, are we ready for this? Do we have a choice? Is it to get dialogue started? Is it actually about transferring assets like homes, pensions, tuition?
Transferring is a complicated verb.
Yeah.
Reparations, Brian Stevenson has a wonderful formulation. He says that, in order for there to be reconciliation, first you have to tell the truth. So first we got to tell the truth. Then we can reconcile. And then that lays the groundwork for repair. So we have to tell the truth. The wealth gap isn't a result of black people not being able to save. I can literally describe policy. Ours is the country that we've built. Boston looks the way it looks for a reason. Mississippi looks the way it looks for a reason. So first we got to tell the truth about the society that we've built, right? And then that becomes the ground, not for this ongoing work of just beating oneself over the back, as it were, but it becomes the ground for reconciliation, which then means that we need to think about what policies would there be, are necessary for repair. So I think reparations understood as a series of policies aimed at addressing deep systemic inequalities that are rooted in, right, certain kinds of ideologies. For example, there's no way to think about immigration policy right now, the debate, without understanding the debate around the Hart-Crane Immigration Act of 1965, which changed the quotas. And that particular Immigration Act of 1965 overturned an Immigration Act that was actually written basically by the Klan in the 1920s. President Biden invoked this in his speech in Tulsa. So you literally have people who want us to go back back to an immigration policy that was written by the Klan. But we erase that fact, right? So the first thing we have to do is tell the truth. Stop lying to ourselves about who we are, what we've done, right? And that's not to say that there aren't lazy people who are black, that there aren't people who are knuckleheads, that there aren't people who are bad persons, but you cannot make the reasonable claim, a reasoned claim, that the conditions of black and brown people in this country are a direct result of hundreds of thousands of people making bad decisions every single day at every turn of the... That doesn't make any sense. It's not logical, right? It's like saying washerwomen are the source of TB. Right.
So let's look at things like redlining and
banking policy,
busing and
like we didn't have a dual housing market. At the very moment in which the vaunted middle class was being built through New Deal policy, black folk were locked out. Agricultural sector locked out, the domestic sector locked out. At the very moment in which the middle class came into existence, FHA wasn't giving us the loans that allowed you. In fact, the neighborhoods that we were living in and being corralled in were being devalued. Right? My colleague Kianga Yamada Taylor has written a wonderful book entitled Race for Profit around this regard. Policy. There's as if there wasn't segregation in schools, segregated labor market, segregated housing market, right? I could go on. My dad couldn't go to Princeton. Right? And the fact that I'm there doesn't mean, you know...
It's another box to check.
Yeah, come on now.
Yeah.
Paul Robeson couldn't go to Princeton, but go ahead.
There's an openness to hear this dialogue, except among those who appear to be more extremist. So this question, and then I will take from the audience, I promise.
Sure.
And these are your questions, actually. So we have an extremist problem in America. How do we save our democracy in the face of white supremacy and domestic terrorism?
You know,
where do we start?
Well, you know, there's the KKK Act. In 1870, there were hearings. And they squashed it. There was a deliberate, under Grant, there was a deliberate effort. People were called into the House of Representatives. They testified to the horrors of Klan behavior. We did it before, and then we allowed it to come back. And I could tell a story about how that happened. I gotta be quicker here. We have to deal with the intimacy of our hatreds. What do I mean, David?
What do you mean?
People knew who tied that fan around Emmett Till's neck.
Right.
Because they drank beer with him. They played checkers with him.
The silence, the implicit toleration?
Because they're the people we love. They're the people you love. Folk know who killed those cops on January 6th. Because they're around their Thanksgiving table. Folk know who these people are. Because you love them. You love them to death. You say, now, Billy, don't bring that nonsense in here today. We just gonna eat. But you know what they believe. And so, and you know that they're just sitting there watching Fox News. You know it. And so part of the challenge, right, is making the decision, right? Making the decision to finally, put the ultimatum. Either you leave this behind, or we're gonna have to leave you behind. And how do you do that to someone how do you say that to someone you love? Right?
Or a colleague you work with, or
I can say it to
neighbor.
A colleague I work with. Like that. But I'm just what I'm trying to get at is that there is something about it's an echo of what was at the heart of the Civil War. Remember, when you read the stories and the narratives or Drew Faust's stuff about the Civil War, it's brother against brother. It's family against family. Right? And so that and the carnage in its wake, right, haunts still. And so the reconciliation that was required, that moment with Woodrow Wilson and the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. And you get the few Confederate soldiers that are still alive and the few Union soldiers who are still alive. What makes it possible? You have to erase the black folk who were at the heart of it from the picture. I hear you sighing.
I'm sighing.
I hear you sighing. Was that because I'm talking too much?
No.
Okay.
That was the reality that you just painted for us.
I just think we have to say it out loud.
Yeah.
And you have to say it with love and with anger.
I'm really touched by the point about that truth and reconciliation is the starting point.
It's sequential.
Questions from the audience. We'll have someone with a microphone come around so we can...
and you guys can ask me anything. I don't mind.
I got more if you don't, so don't worry. Please raise your hand and Jana will be around with the microphone.
Madam Chair.
And then if there's an online question, we'll take that from our online audience as well.
Thank you. You've upset me. My head is spinning. And I wonder, what's the conversation that's missing in the world right now such that people don't get racism and slavery as the heart of our condition today? What's the conversations that we're not having?
It's a hard question, right? I'm going to come at it by way of an example. Did you see the grandfather at Uvalde at one of the funerals? He was crying and he was pleading to the police officers, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you do anything? And there was a fellow who was standing next to him. I don't know who he was. He said, that's in the past. You need to move beyond that. Now, he's literally just buried his grandchild.
Oh my God.
It's the most morally deaf comment I've heard in recent years. He says to the grandfather, that's in the past. We need to move beyond this. Part of the problem is that a kind of reckoning with the reality of slavery and its afterlife, and Jim Crow and its afterlife, requires a reckoning with oneself. To admit to the evils of that is to admit something about who we are. And that's not the way the American ideology works. So it becomes a difficult conversation. So what are the conversations we need to have? Part of what I did in Begin Again is the first chapter of the book is entitled The Lie. And it's not about kind of epistemic false, it's not epistemic, the lie is just a provocative formulation, right? To get us to say that we are a society organized and built on the belief that some people, because of the color of their skin, ought to be valued more than others. And there is a broad architecture that we've put in place to support that. And part of the work that we have to do is to imagine American democracy shorn of that assumption. So Lincoln can't become the kind of man or the kind of person his conception of democracy requires, because he's committed to that view. That's the irony.
Yeah,
so that's the conversation that we're trying to get at.
I mean, Ibram Kendi in his work is talking about, I'm going to do a terrible job at paraphrasing it, but it's not enough to be tolerant of others. It's not enough to just call out overt racism when you see it, but we have to be, and white people in particular, have to be actively engaged in the work of anti-racism to get at the policy questions that we were just talking about 10 or 15 minutes ago.
And the way in which I parse that, instead of being anti-something, we have to be about the work of imagining the world, a world, shorn of it, without it. So you get the negative construction, right? We have to be anti-racist enough. Right. I want us to imagine the world as it should be, close to the ground, in light of the world as it is. We have to do that imaginative work. And that's going to require something very hard, something very difficult of us. We're going to have to stop spending so much energy trying to convince people who hold noxious views that they shouldn't hold them. Because by the time we finish trying to convince them, we don't have enough energy to actually build the world we want. Have you ever been in those committee meetings with people and you spend all your damn time working? Oh, God. And by the time you finish managing that committee person, you haven't done anything. We spend all of our time managing these people, right? Trying to convince them. When Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, he did not try to convince Democrats who thought he was the harbinger of World War III. Remember?
Star Wars and all that.
We thought he was trickle down. George H.W. Bush called Reagan's economic theory voodoo economics. Right? He didn't try to convince people. He just picked up the football and put it on a different field. And we've been playing by those rules for the last 40 years. Let's grab the football.
So let's go build the society we want to live in then. That's what I hear you saying?
Yeah, that's more than just being anti-racist. Let's imagine the world as it ought to be, and let's make it a reality. That's very different.
Is there another question? Jana, do you have one from online?
I do, thank you. Professor, Latanya asks, should this experiment known as the United States of America falter, what do you imagine as Plan B for African Americans particularly?
I've been keeping that question away, principally by way of really good Irish whiskey. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
It's like what we say, I think, in the climate justice world, there isn't another planet. There isn't another, we have to get this right. I don't believe,
I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't believe that, the collapse of America means the collapse of civilization as such. That's just American exceptionalism. I don't know what will happen to these we are uniquely modern creatures of the West. Right? This experiment has been distinctive in the history of Western modernity. And so what does it mean for it to collapse? What does it give license to? And right now, I'm just imagining the barbarity on the horizon, the cruelty on the horizon, what awaits the most vulnerable among us if this thing collapses. And let's be clear, I'm not being hyperbolic. The midterms and the presidential election coming up, the republic is at stake. Because if we, and I'm not a partisan in any way, even though I'm on MSNBC, but this is not, we cannot do this. We cannot slip into the traditional political horse race as if the opponent is a liberal actor. The opponent is illiberal. They're not committed to democracy. And unless we concede that, we're opening ourselves up to some insidious forces that could really overrun the Republic. And I mean that from...
And the January 6th events are the biggest canary in the coal mine of that kind of threat.
And remember January 6th, stop the steal, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee. Then what happens after January 6th? Spate of voting laws, immigration debate, great replacement theory before it was named in the public domain, animating so much of it. Richard Papier, Chicago, University of Chicago, did a study of most of the people who participated in the January 6th insurrection. Most of them came from counties that Biden won, but counties that are demographically changing. We're in a fascinating moment. Yeah.
I'm going to finish our conversation unless there's another. Well, yes, we will take one more question. Thanks, Andrew. So wait for the microphone, please.
Because we got the folks online.
Yeah. Thank you.
You mentioned that we're in a fascinating moment. So I've read everything by James Baldwin, so I'm so glad you've written this book to bring him back to the fore, because it feels like he could have written it yesterday. But as you said, we're in a fascinating moment. So do you think that we are in a civil war, or has it already heading towards civil war, or has it already begun?
Great question. I think we're in a cold civil war that turns hot every now and then. You know, the Kerner Commission report begins with 2 Americas. That's 68 after Watts and the riots after King has been assassinated. Watts is 65, but we're divided in terms of urban, rural, East Coast, Sun Belt, right? The country, one of the most startling representations of the cold civil war is the fact that Fox News isn't going to cover the January 6th hearings. Not even so, and remember, has the largest viewership of cable news. So there are going to be millions of people who won't see or hear that story. So we're in a cold civil war. Where people are trying to rig the terms of the debate. So we can't out-organize them. So Enslaves and Black Lives Voters Matter and APEC organizations in Georgia can turn out millions of folk. But if we got the folk who won't count them, and we're talking about that in Georgia, we're talking about that in Texas, we're talking about that in North Carolina, we're talking about that in Pennsylvania, we're talking about that in Michigan, we're talking about that in Wisconsin. Given the Electoral College, everyone that I just mentioned,
all the swing states,
matters. So we're seeing not only voter suppression, we're seeing systemic efforts at voter nullification. Right? And remember, what is King saying in the I Have a Dream speech? Right, down in Alabama, where the words of interposition and nullification are dripping from the lips of his racist governor. Remember that moment? We're seeing it play out, right? So we're in a cold civil war. Last point. And the gun debate is rooted in it. There's a moment when the Black Panther Party makes the wrong turn in the Sacramento State Legislature. And they have their guns and they go in, and suddenly we're talking about gun control in California. But one of the things that we don't track is that the story around the Second Amendment emerges as the social revolution of the mid-20th century changes. Big government is now changing our way of life, threatening our way of life. We must be able to defend our way of life. So the gun debate is actually rooted in the very things that they're trying to undo. It's all nested. It's all nested. And we're not worried about people with pink hats hundreds of thousands of people marching. We're not worried about folks singing, "We shall overcome." We need to be worried about the people with the AR-15s. But we're more concerned about democratic socialists than we are white nationalists in the United States. We're more comfortable with the extremists on the right than we are with folks who are calling for a living wage, that everyone should have health care. But I'm going on and on. Sorry.
Final question.
Final answer.
You're an educator. What happens in our classrooms, whether it's at second level or third level, is an equally important part of this. Second level curricula are also under threat right now as another form of control of information and control of access.
Right.
How should high school American history and literature teachers deal with their challenge on this topic?
God, I mean, they are on the front lines. Many of them find themselves in the crosshairs of the law in places like Tennessee. I think the best way to do this is contrapuntally. Right? What does it mean to teach Jefferson's notes at the same time that you would teach David Walker's appeal? David Walker is responding to Jefferson's notes. What does it mean to use Edward Said's language, to read them together? What does it mean to read Melville in light of abolitionists? Right? What is Melville saying about American exceptionalism? Right? How is he deconstructing it? It's fascinating, right? So part of what we have to do as teachers is, I think, curate encounters that unsettle our assumptions. That curatorial practice aims at disrupting a kind of provincialism, because we're all provincial. The question is whether or not you choose to be parochial. There's a difference between being provincial and being parochial. I am a child of Moss Point, subject to the limits of where I was born and raised. My world has expanded over the course of my journey. But if I choose to be narrow, to shutter my eyes, then that's a very different kind. So parochialism is very dangerous in a democracy. So what our teachers have to do is to figure out, under these very, very difficult conditions, how to curate, right, the imagination, how to curate the encounter to strengthen the imagination, to make it robust, to give it the muscle so that it could do the work that it must do. But I should say this really quickly by way of ending. Our babies, young folk, are growing up, we might describe them as the catastrophic generation. Look at what they've experienced. I mean, they know this place is broken. A world in crisis, a planet screaming, murders upon murders, videos, student loan debt. They know it's broken. And they're reaching for languages to imagine the world differently. But the irony, the horror, is that some are reaching for old languages. The language of fascism, the language of authoritarianism. 18 was the age of that boy in Buffalo. 21 was the age of that boy in El Paso. Dylan Roof, these aren't baby boomers. So it's not just the fact of youthfulness that is the source of our salvation. They are reaching for different languages, and part of our task is to give them the fertile soil to imagine the world otherwise, right? To reach forward as opposed to reaching backward. And as an educator, my task is, again, to build the muscle of the imagination. Because as Emerson says, God speaks to us through our imaginations. So.
Well, you started with reading and you ended with reading. We didn't design it that way, but that's a beautiful moment for this conversation, this difficult conversation in this library. Please join me in thanking Dr. Eddie Glaude for sharing his personal story, thoughts on where we are, an amazing list of references I now want to go read up more about that I didn't know before tonight. So thank you. So thank you. Please join me in thanking Eddie. I'm going to try and choose to leave with hope, or hope with choice.
That's right.
We'll have the book signing in a moment. This is our last program in this series, but we'll be back in the fall with a new series, and we'll talk to some interesting people as well. So please keep an eye on dpl.org for more information. Thank you for joining us in person. Thank you for joining us online. And until next time, please be safe and be well. And be hopeful. Be hopeful.